all of you. All right. I think everybody was here yesterday, but if not, I'm John Nimmers. I'm the curator of the Panama Canal Museum Collection. I know we're expecting a few guests today who weren't here yesterday. And we also have a high school class that's going to be joining us. We have a high school that's affiliated with the University of Florida. And one of their instructors reached out to us when they saw this advertised. Yes. And they're going to be joining us for this morning's film screening and our discussion with Mr. Roman Foster. So they're coming in now. While they're doing that, a few homework things. We were passing around yesterday a contact list. Is there anybody who didn't get to sign this? If you hold up your hand, I'll start passing it around again. I'll pass it over here. All right. We have, for those of you who were here yesterday, you probably all got one of these, but if not, programs and calendars are available on the table over near the door, near the maps on the wall there. We're going to continue streaming online this afternoon. We're not streaming this morning sessions because, as I mentioned yesterday, we're showing an entire film screening, so we are not going to stream that online, of course. But we are recording the introduction this morning and Mr. Roman Foster's comments, as well as our question and answer period after. And we're hoping that we'll be able to put those recordings online so that those are the people who have been participating from a distance will be able to at least see the introduction and the discussion, if not the film itself. We'll certainly provide Roman's contact information to them so that they can purchase copies. Let's see. Again, if you need any help with anything at all in terms of directions, logistics, you can ask me. You can ask Betsy Bemis. Raise your hand. There she is. Pam Cunningham Williams is right in the back here. And Melissa Jerome, who was here yesterday, she's going to be joining us in a little while. If you were here yesterday, one word of apology. I was embarrassed about this yesterday. Everybody got the sign-up sheet? Okay, great. Thank you. I'll take that back. Appreciate it. My wife always accuses me of not being able to say my own name properly. I trip over words all the time. And somehow yesterday, I managed to mangle a name that I say probably a dozen times a week because we're working on a project constantly. But in my presentation yesterday, I said Enid Hill twice, and her name is Enid Hall. So I apologize. I'm so glad you came up and told me. No, I know you said it's nothing, but I shouldn't make mistakes like that. Oh, yes. Oh, Barbara's in the room. I also want to acknowledge Barbara Hood, who is our communications public relations officer. And Barbara helps with all of the programs and the signage and the promotion of all the images. Thank you, Barbara. Also, I would like to welcome to the podium Carmen Grimes Eccles to say a few words on behalf of Pan Caribbean Sankofa.
Pleasant good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and welcome back to another opportunity of great programming that we have for you to listen to some stories that honors and respect our ancestors who have gone before us. And I just want to say that I'm glad that the young folks are here. So I'm giving you a special shout out, especially because you're looking at the future right here. Us older folks, you will become us and you will share the story. So just welcome. And just want to thank everyone for supporting Pan Caribbean Sankofa and University of Florida. Enjoy the day, travel home safely. And you came from Panama, California, anybody else? New Jersey, the world over. So it's very special for us to welcome you and just thanks for your support. And we're gonna reach out to you. And when we do, we hope you say yes to doing an interview with us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Carmen. And I've also, we talked about you before you came in the room, but I'm going to get you to wave your hands and say hi to everybody. So this is the Grizel Santiago Spanish class, correct? Yes, thank you. Hello, Grizel. And this is one class or these two classes. Can you say a little bit about who our students are that are joining us today? You can come to the podium if you'd like. Spanish 3 and 4, okay.
She used to be the Spanish 1 teacher, but she also, her husband is from Panama. She has been in Panama many times. I have been in Panama many times. And I really do love Panama, but we want to learn as much as we can from Panama.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot and bring you to the podium. Well, welcome. We're so thrilled you can be here with us today. And actually, this morning is a great session that you've joined us for. I have the privilege of introducing Roman J. Foster, who is the producer and director of Diggers, which is a documentary film. Have you seen a DVD before? This is DVD. It's a documentary film that chronicles the history of Black men from the Caribbean who built the Panama Canal. Mr. Foster is an expert on the history of the Diggers, and he has lectured and given talks on the topic frequently. Since 1977, he has gathered historic photos, archival documents, and footage, and he recorded many hours of interviews with the Diggers to document the vital contributions of these laborers. Born in Panama of Caribbean descent, Mr. Foster immigrated to the US in 1965. His grandfathers worked on the construction of the canal. He's a graduate of the State University of New York at Stony Brook, where he studied history. He received his master's degree from the City University of New York, Brooklyn College. And I'll also say by way of introduction that, and I know I'm repeating myself a little bit yesterday, but for those of you who are just joining us today, we have been recommending the documentary to researchers and to classes that come in for many years now, because it is the single first, I believe this, according to my knowledge, I think this was the very first attempt to interview anyone who were the original constructor, the laborers for the canal. There were certainly, if you were Colonel Goethals or somebody like that, you got interviewed. But in terms of just interviewing anybody, no matter what race you were, what ethnicity, I think this was the first attempt to do that in any kind of audiovisual way. And so we use this film extensively. I can't tell you what a treasure it is, and we're thrilled to have Mr. Roman Foster here today. Roman. Up here too. They're going to be on this screen so that the audience can see them.
Okay.
You just click on these two icons right there.
Which one?
This one is the certificate,
And
and then this one is the. Oh. Bear with us just 1 second. Sorry, I managed to close the one file we need open. There we go.
the ultimate insult.
There we go. Yeah, I know, right? Okay, so they're both one here. Just open them up together if that's okay with you.
Stand close because I may need you.
All right, and I'm gonna do one more thing. Okay.
Okay. Good morning. I am thrilled to be here this morning to share with you the epic story of the diggers of the Panama Canal. It is a story that is very dear to all of us. And to the young students sitting with us this morning, just a word of, I just want to share something with you. in life, as you grow older, it is very important that you keep an open mind. Do not close your mind to anything. Even if it's different, do not close your mind, because learning is one of the greatest experiences you'll ever have. And when you deal with people, the more you know, the more you respect people, a better world will be made. And since you are the future, I just want to share that word of advice with you. Always keep an open mind. Do not close yourself to anything, because that's how you become a better person. Before I start with the presentation, I need to acknowledge several individuals whose dedication and vision have made this conference a success. I was very impressed with what happened in this room yesterday. It is an event that we will always remember. I wish to acknowledge Ms. Judy Russell, the Dean of University Libraries. It was a pleasure meeting you yesterday. And thank you for your efforts in leading the University of Florida in this quest to document and preserve a long lost history. I also wish to acknowledge Ms. Frances Williams Yearwood, Director of the Pan-Caribbean Sankofa. Thank you for your dedication, your vision, and all the efforts you're putting in to preserve our history. We, as the descendants of these builders of the canal, will always be indebted to you forever. Also wish to thank all the members of the Pan-Caribbean Sankofa for your work. And believe me, we do appreciate what you're doing and support you 1,000 times over. Thank you. Also wish to thank John Nemers and Betsy Bemis. I hope I pronounced it right. Those two individuals are the curators of the Panama Canal Museum collection. And I envy your task. I know it's a big one. I want to thank you for your dedication, your vision to the preservation of this great history, and for making the University of Florida a leader in this effort. I know of no other university in the United States where this is being done. And I've been to many of them across the country in relation to this Diggers project. You stand out. I know that the descendants of the Diggers will always hold you in high regard. Thank you. Betsy, thank you for Monday. You and your husband, Dave. It was great. I thank you for your hospitality and for that nice reception we had. Thank you. And make sure you share it with your husband. Okay. Finally, I wish to thank all those friends who have supported the Diggers Project since its beginning back in the 70s. Louisa Martin and Sheila Wilkinson, who was instrumental in keeping me alive, because when I went to Panama back in the 70s to begin the research of diggers, she and her husband Basilio used to invite me over for dinner. And if it wasn't for her dinners, I probably wouldn't have the energy or the existence to be here today. So thanks for those. And she is a good cook, by the way. I also wish to thank all of you for being here this morning. I am very impressed with your loyalty and your belief in what we have done and what is being done. You deserve a round of applause. A little background. As a child, elementary school, it was when I became aware of this story. And how? Oral history, a very important tool. My grandfather, by then he was an elderly man. He had suffered a stroke. So he was crippled on half of his body. That's how I remember him, because before that, I just have no memory. But as a child, I remember walking with him. He had his cane, and I used to go with him. I mean, after school, I would come home and join him. And I would take him out on the balcony where he would meet up with his friend, Mr. Campbell. Because in those days, you don't call anybody by their first name. If you're a child, you respected them. And so Mr. Campbell stayed with me. And so I would take my grandfather around the balcony, and he would meet up with his friend, Mr. Campbell, every day. And here I am, 7 years old, 6, 7 years old, 8. And I would see these two gentlemen sit down and reminisce about their experiences building the Panama Canal. To me, it was just listening to these two gentlemen talk about a history that I was not aware of, but I would listen to them. And at the time, I really did not understand the value of what I was hearing. But all those tales, those stories stayed with me all my life. Many years passed since those days, and the story stayed with me. I went to university, went to grad school, and the story just kept floating in my head. In the mid-1970s, after I graduated my degrees and everything, I was trying to decide what to do with my life. A friend of mine told me, listen, you need to get a job to put some money in your pocket while you decide what you're doing with your life. So she helped me get a job in the Barclay Hotel. Here I have history degree working in a hotel. The Barclay Hotel, if you are not familiar, is one of the famous hotels in New York City. There's the Waldorf Astoria, and right across the street is the Barclay. And so a lot of celebrities, people of fame, would stay either at the Waldorf or at the Barclay. And that is where I met a man who would become very influential in my life and who would give me his blessing in many ways to do what I ended up doing. His name was Alex Haley. And if you do not know Alex Haley was a writer, journalist, and he is the one who put out that historic book called Roots. If you have not seen Roots, take some time out and watch it. It's wonderful. And so Mr. Haley and I used to talk a lot because he stayed there at the Barclay. Matter of fact, that is where he finished the last few chapters of Roots. And I work nights and he was a night person. So he would come down to the lobby and it was luxurious lobby. And we would sit and we would talk. And he will share with me his experiences researching and doing Roots. In turn, I would tell him about my story. And I would tell him that I knew of the building of the Panama Canal, and I knew the amazing effort this achievement was. Haley never, I call him Haley, he never knew the story. And so when I brought it to his attention, he was like, wow. So I said to Haley one day, Mr. Haley, I am fascinated with the story, and I believe that something needs to be done because nowhere is there mention of the diggers. And if you do have mention, it's superficial. About that time, a book called The Path Between the Seas was published. It's a bestseller, big, famous, popular book. David McCullough. It was the story of the building of the Panama Canal. And I had a couple of friends who have been friends for life. I've known them since I first came to this country, Steve and Erica Kaplan. And they one day bought me a copy of this book and they told me, you need to read this. So I read it. And it's a great book. Not denying that. But once again, as all the other books I had read on the history of the canal, the question of the Black laborers was minimal. Now here's the book considered the Bible on Panama Canal history. But yet, in this Bible, very little was said about a people who are responsible for building the canal. I mean, he mentioned them, but very superficial. The focus of his book was Theodore Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States at the time, and who was responsible for having this canal built, which in itself is a fascinating story. Touch upon it in the film a little, but it's an interesting story, how he was able to build the Panama Canal. Just a side note. The Isthmus of Panama was a province of Colombia. It was never an independent country. Theodore Roosevelt had this vision, and he knew that America's power required a canal that would join the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. And for military purposes, because if we had bases in California, we had bases on the East Coast. If something happened in the south of the United States, Latin America, the Caribbean, if we were to send ships from California to the hot spots like Cuba, where the Americans got involved militarily, a ship would take about a month to get from California to the hot spot in South Central America, Caribbean. And so he realized that we needed some method to shorten the distance of travel between East and West. He went to Colombia and he said to the Colombian government, I need permission for you to build a canal across your Isthmus of Panama. The Colombians, and there's a famous cartoon about this, and the American press took that one and ran with it. Colombia was trying to hold up the United States, basically. They wanted millions and millions of dollars to give the United States permission to build this canal. Theodore Roosevelt said, that won't work. We want this canal, but we're not going to pay our lives with it. What did he do? He approached a group of wealthy Colombians living on the isthmus, and he said to them, I will make a deal with you. I will reward you and make you leaders of a new country if you work with me. They agreed because they saw the numbers, the money. It was big money you offered these people. On November 3rd, 1903, this group of wealthy individuals led a revolution in the Isthmus of Panama and declared their independence from Colombia. Roosevelt had promised them that if any action you take, I will have our ships sitting on the coast, waiting to protect you and defend you. And it happened. They declared their independence, and the next day, they agreed to have the United States of America build a canal across their newly independent country, Panama. The funny thing about it is that the flag of Panama was put together in a hotel room in the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. The United States government had people put together this flag, and they sent it down to Panama and told the people of Panama, this is your flag. If you didn't know that, now you do. And so the path between the seas not only focused on Roosevelt, but it focused on Colonel George Goethals. Goethals was a colonel, and when Roosevelt decided to build this canal, he figured that the best way to do the job was to get the United States military involved in its construction. And so Colonel Goethals was appointed the chief engineer and eventually would become the first governor of the canal zone. In addition to Goethals, the path between the seas highlighted the role of Colonel Gorgas, who was the man responsible. He was in the United States Military Medical Division. And he's the man that found the cure. Well, he didn't find it, but he borrowed some ideas from people like Dr. Carlos Finlay in Cuba. And he came up with a cure for malaria and yellow fever. These two diseases were the greatest enemy the workforce in Panama had to face. I mean, people were dropping dead every day because of yellow fever and malaria. It's a mosquito that would sting you, and while doing so, would infect you with the disease, and there was no cure for it. So once you had malaria, yellow fever, you're good as dead. And the other name that was made a hero in this book is David Dubois Gaylord, who was also an Army engineer. And he's the man responsible for leading the forces that did the most difficult part of the construction of the canal. To understand it, the path that they had decided to follow was mountainous. There are mountains all over. And so what the United States had to do was to level these mountains, create a path that would extend from one end, the Atlantic Ocean, to the other end, the Pacific Ocean, so that the waters from those oceans would travel through. In addition, they built the largest man-made lake ever that would supply the water for the canal to operate. It's, you will see some of it in the film. But just remember that name, David Dubois Gaylord, because at the end of this presentation, you're going to see something that will not surprise you, but you will not believe it. And so Haley one day said to me, you know what, we've been talking about this for months now. Got to do something about it. I said, what do you recommend? He said to me, go to Panama. That's your starting point in this research. And we had sat down and we looked at the years, the numbers, and we agreed that there was a possibility that I would find survivors of that undertaking. And so we had to move quickly because by our numbers, the survivors would be late 70s, 80s, even 90s. And it was a question of time. They were dying very fast, old age, and we had to capture them. And so Haley put me on the right track, set me up, and I got, oops, I'm sorry. He set me up and I went and he told me the first thing we need to do is get yourself a good tape recorder. And in those days, cassettes, I don't know if you know about the little audio cassettes, but that was the thing that everybody used to record. And so we bought cases of cassettes. We didn't know, I didn't know what I was going into. It was foreign to me. Just like the diggers, when they went to Panama, they had no idea what they were getting themselves into. But I went to Panama and started to, I don't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. But I learned that the first of every month, the United States government provided these survivors with a little stipend. That was their retirement. It was not even called a retirement. It was just a cash disability relief. For the most part, these workers received $25 a month. And it was based on the formula. You get $1 for every year you worked on the canal. Now, by then, most of these workers had devoted 40, 45 years to the canal. So you wonder, $25 one per, what happened to somebody who worked more than 25 years? So what the United States government did was, since you're not American citizens, we're only going to acknowledge the first 25 years of service. And so whatever is left, that's your contribution to American society. So the first of every month, these old timers would go to these, they had an office in the Atlantic end, an office in the Pacific end of the canal. And you would see them, these old timers walking their canes, and it was touching. And the first of every month, they went to get their little stipend. Some got less than 25, by the way, but 25 was the average. Nobody got higher than 25. And that is how I first met the builders of the canal. I would talk to them, make arrangements to visit them in their homes, take my little tape recorder, and talk to them and get the story of their experiences. This went on for almost a year. I was in Panama for about a year doing this initial research. In addition to what Haley helped me with, I had to make more, get more. So it was my savings that I took out and I put it into this effort. And so I lived off Haley's help and my savings all this time in Panama. And so meeting these guys was a turning point in my life, because one of the most touching moments that I've experienced talking to these individuals was the fact that, and I couldn't understand it in the beginning, but that later on I caught on. There's nothing more touching than to see an 80, 85, 90-year-old individual crying. And here I am, like, how do I react to this? But as I asked, why are you crying? They all said the same thing. And these were, I met them individually. This was not a group thing. Nobody has ever come to me and asked me what happened in Panama. Nobody. And so when this young guy went to them and asked them, it was like, finally, it was joy that they were able to tell their story. And out of those meetings came a commitment that I would not stop this project until their story was told. And hence, diggers. But when I first went to Panama, and then later on I went to Barbados and Jamaica, because they were all over. And fortunately, the United States government, as part of this cash disability relief program, had the address, the names and addresses of all the surviving diggers in the world. And they cooperated and they gave me the list. And so I was able to go to all these countries and find them. I remember Jamaica having to walk because there were no forms of transportation going up into these hills and mountains where these guys live, their families. And you walk 2 hours in the hot sun up a hill. You get there only to find out that such and such died last week. So it's an effort. And so kept going because I had made a commitment and I couldn't turn my back on it. So in the beginning, the goal was to record as many histories as possible. There was no question of film, nothing, no idea of a film being made. It was just recording a history on these little cassettes, which to this day I still have, lots of them. So I came back to New York and from Barbados and Jamaica and Panama. And I started to go through these interviews to get an idea of what I'm dealing with. I also used that material to identify those survivors who provided me with eloquently told stories. And I identified those individuals. After that, I said, okay, what am I going to do with all this? So I put together a crew of filmmakers. Cameraman, sound, lighting guy, it works. And the goal was to put together a 10-minute sampler of the story, which I then shopped to different entities, including PBS, the Public Broadcasting System. When I took it to PBS in Washington, DC, and they saw the sample, they were thrilled. They were like, wow, we didn't know this story had taken place. I said, well, that's what I'm here for, to let you know. And I need your help. I want to do a film with all this material I have. Because by then I had researched hundreds of photos, old photos of the canal construction. I had documents. I had found all these things in the 10 years of research. PBS, the Ford Foundation, the John and Catherine Macaulay Foundation, and a few others, the Field Foundation. They all saw the sampler and they were touched. And the point that I made to them was the story had never been told. There's no written history of this story. So I had to start from scratch. No books on these guys. So everything had to come through oral history. And eventually, we put together the funds that we needed to do a television documentary on the building of the Panama Canal. We decided on a 90-minute segment. I then went back to Panama, Barbados, Jamaica, but this time we went with a crew of filmmakers. And we located as many of them as possible who would tell us a story that we could use in a documentary film. And so I have the only recorded interviews on film, because we use 16mm film in those days. And I have all these interviews in the can, as we say in the film business, and it's there, stored. And that is how Diggers was created. After all those years of work and efforts, in 1985, believe it or not, that far back, PBS premiered Diggers across the United States on every PBS station they had, including the Virgin Islands, Guam, they all showed it. August 1985. Why August? Because August is the anniversary of the Panama Canal completion. And so it's a significant period. And this was our way of paying tribute to the builders of the Panama Canal. Very few people know how many lives were lost building the canal. And it's a shame that even though all that took place, nobody cared to tell the story. So I don't want to spend much time talking, because we're going to show the film. Then after this film is screened, I'll come back here and we'll have a little conversation about what you saw. Okay? So here is Diggers.
I'd like to invite Mr. Foster back to the podium. Oh, let me turn off the volume here, pardon me. Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Foster back to the podium to take some questions and comments. I'm sure we have many. I want to mention just logistically, we're about to start bringing in some lunch and setting up down there. So we're going to keep it as quiet as we can, but we'll be going back and forth. I'm going to be going around with a microphone. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please raise your hand. I'll come to you with the microphone. And let's see here. Oh, yes, thank you. And Fran reminds me that we have DVDs of the film that you just watched available for sale, and you can see Fran and she'll be happy to help you with that. Mr. Foster, thank you.
Thank you. First. Okay.
All right, questions or comments for Mr. Foster?
That's a masterful job, sir.
Thank you.
My question is, how long did it take an average voyage from Barbados to Panama for the workers?
Range from a week to a month, depending on.
They didn't have cabins, did they?
No. They all
you.
lived on the, as you saw.
Questions or comments? Yes. Oh. Okay, here we go.
So it was a great feat what you did. I've been with you for years, years and years. What I want to know is what happens now? It seems like I'm left hanging. It seems like I need something more from that end to now. So where are we now? Where we left off? Where are we going as a people, as Panamanian, as West Indian in Panama?
Well, the hope is that the next generations will pick up the struggle and continue to work. That's what this is all about, laying a foundation for others to do research and more work and give us a complete story of what happened. So I am leaving it up to the descendants to take this matter seriously and continue the work of preserving the history.
Sheila.
We all have to take responsibility.
Hello, I'm one of the survivors. I'm retired from Pan Canal. I retired at 43. I have 33 years that I retired. I'm 76 years old, and my grandfather worked there. My dad retired from the Panama Canal. My mom retired from the Panama Canal. I retired from Panama Canal, and my husband. And I just want to say my dad was, I have something that John has. I have a card from my grandmother. She was one of these DRs. That's the disability relief. I have a card, or have her card. John made a copy of it. And I also have a card showing a copy. My father belonged to the Barbadian Society. And the Panama Canal no longer exists as an entity. Now there's the ACP, which is I can't remember the name now, but the canal is still run by Panamanians. And your question was, what happens now? The waterways still exist. What we need to emphasize is the ones that did the building. That's we should be worried about who helped to build it. These are people that are invisible. They were invisible, and we are trying to see if we can recover some of this. Recover, because we as a people, I think we didn't have a voice. And the ones that have a voice, like I do, I do talk. And there are a lot of people that were kind of afraid of saying anything. I think that the younger people need to know you need to express your feelings. You cannot just make things stay the way they are or the way they were. And I said, I am a good person that I can tell you, I retired from that same waterway at 43 years of age. I'm 76 years old and I have 33 years. I retired the 3rd of August of this year. My grandparents did not enjoy what I did. My parents enjoyed some of it, but I have enjoyed. I worked for 23 years and 1 week, and I'm retired 33 years, and I got a lump sum money when I retired. So I am a living testimony of what happened and what could happen, but I enjoy things for some of the older people. Okay?
Thank you, Sheila. And thank you also, Sheila, for letting me borrow your family's card so that I can make a scan of it. That'd be a great addition to our collection. Oh, thank you. I thought you were holding your hand up, Bernadette.
So actually, I think amazing first. And so I think actually some of my questions has to do with where we go from here, because my husband is from Agua Dulce, Panama. So they're my family. And in looking at the history and wondering about the history and what the population was prior to the beginning of the building of the canal, and whether some of those workers, because how would you go about finding out? Because as I look back at my husband's family, it's my family too, their history, and looking at some of the names and where they came from, and how would you find out if ancestors within the family had worked within the canal, had come from the islands to Panama to work?
That is a difficult problem because there are no diggers surviving to this day. And very little record was kept of these people because they were not important. They were not viewed as a valuable member of the enterprise. And so when we did this, I had to start from scratch. I had to go around finding the stories, reading newspapers, looking for articles, magazines, and oral history. And so once the canal was turned over to Panama, all records were sent to Maryland. I think it's Maryland. And that is where the United States government has everything stored. The National Archives will have something, but not what you're looking for. And so it's very difficult to really track the history and the information about these people and where they are or their families. It's very difficult.
I would also say that when you say that the US and the enterprise looked upon the laborers as not important, I think they probably had the same point of view towards the Panamanians as well.
Yes, yes. But unfortunately, what has happened since is now that Panama has taken control of the canal, they have given priority to Panamanians. And again, they have continued the policy of not acknowledging the role of the Black workers. For example, diggers has been shown across the United States, the Virgin Islands, Guam, by PBS. Every PBS station showed it as a tribute to these men. The film has been shown in Europe, the Caribbean, everywhere. The only place on earth where diggers has not been viewed by people is Panama. We went to Panama and met with the president and asked him, hey, what can you do to help us put this on national television in Panama for the people to see? And their response was very sad. Anything pertaining to Black people like this is not important to us. Yeah, now, recently, but back then when we went to them, they didn't want any part of it. And I mean, I left that presidential palace with my heart like flat. In Panama City, trying to remember who it was. It was in the 80s, middle 80s. I don't know, I don't remember. I forgot them completely because after I left there, I mean, there was no need for me to remember them, you know. Our conversation was finished.
I have another question, comment right here.
Hello, I was wondering, how much money must have been owed by the American government to the diggers from all those years of unpaid labor and, you know, all those situations that they got into?
We're talking lots of money. It's hard to put it in terms of totals, but based on what you just saw and what they got in return, $25 a month, it's a lot, an awful lot of money. But the United States government has washed their hands of this because they turned over the canal to Panama. So now they say, hey, we did what we could when we had the chance. Now it's up to the governments of Panama, and you know their feelings towards this whole thing. They won't even cut the grass in the cemeteries. So imagine all these men who were dead, who died and who were buried in these 3 major cemeteries in Panama. They don't even have respect for that. As we as I heard earlier and yesterday, Pan Caribbean Sankofa is trying very hard to get the government of Panama to take on its responsibility. But they're having as much problems as I had with them with their requests to at least keep the cemeteries a respectable, decent place for the remains to have. And to them, it's not important. It's all about economics and what is good for Panama. They don't care about it. But yes, these workers are owed a lot for what they did. And considering what you're looking at is the certificate that each one of them received, the cash disability. They did not even call it a retirement plan. It was a cash disability. We're handing out $25 every month to you to live off for what they did. And that is part of the tragedy, but it's a good question. They're owed a lot of money for what they did. And their families got nothing whatsoever.
Yeah, I really want to thank you for this film because I lived through a period of it. My grandfather lost a leg, and I, as a child, did not realize the sacrifice that my grandfather made in helping to dig and build that canal. I saw what my father went through. I experienced that living in La Boca, what my father went through in terms of discrimination and what took place with him. I really, emotionally now, the film really touched my heart. And I realized how much of a sacrifice that my family gave for this canal. And millions of dollars that is made each ship that goes through that canal, but the trickling down is not felt by the people that actually made the sacrifice. Thank you.
You're welcome. But you know, that is the shame of it. The millions of dollars that is produced every year from this Panama Canal, because we're talking about every nation of the world uses the Panama. They have to. It's the only way to get around. And yet they cannot find a few $1,000s to cut the grass in a cemetery. I mean, that tells you something. Where's all that money going? What are the priorities? And it is, I mean, when I hear everybody talk about getting these cemeteries cleaned up, and the government tells you that they don't have the money, they have the money, lots of it. It's just that we are not a priority in their vision. So that is what the diggers got, a certificate. And
Thank you, Roman. It's Bernadette again. It was really heartwarming, I guess, and heart-wrenching to watch Diggers again. I had seen it before, and from when I saw it so many years ago, I still have a dream. I would like to see Diggers shown in the movie theaters in Panama, but for the school students. I believe that each teacher, I don't know if it's high school or elementary or what, but they should have an outing and take each class to see that movie. That is my dream. I don't know where to go with it. I never really did know where to go with this, but the reason I'm saying that is because my grandson went to school here, and when he graduated in California, there is a camp outdoors camp that they take all the sixth grade students to. When you get to sixth grade, they all look forward to going to the mountains. And every school has that program where they take the kids to camp for a week or so, and they rotate, and everybody gets that experience. Now, California is much bigger than the entire country of Panama, I believe. But if they can do that, we can do this if we really want to do it. And we talk about being invisible and so forth. It is a true fact. It's not made up or whatever. Just before I came up here, I drove into the gas station to get some gas, and this young man asked me if I was American. And he was an Gunayala. He was from a Panamanian tribe. So I said, no, I'm not from the United States, but it seems like we have the same problems, the same issue in this country, because they don't get recognized the way they should either, and we don't either. So the thing is, that is still my dream, and it's not like nobody is doing anything. There's a lot being done, but we're slow, a little slow getting there, but we will. Thank you.
If you look at the screen, you will see what the United States did for the surviving diggers. Yeah. And I just want you to see this, that even though many of them worked like 45, 50 years on the canal, from child, teenagers to adulthood, the cash, and they didn't call it a retirement. It says their cash relief. And the excuse was they were not American citizens. And therefore, American labor laws did not protect them. They did not fall under those laws. But $25 a month is what they got. And as they said in the film, cost of living goes up. They add a few pennies to the 25. I think today, well, nobody, the program is dead because they're all gone. But before the last one died, I think the highest they were getting was less than $200 a month for what they did. I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, thank you, John, for the presentation. And I wanted to address the teacher here, and you want to find out some more about your family. And that's what we like to do, look back in order to move forward. So I'm excited to partner with you to see what we
The next
could
one.
find out
Okay,
and
great.
get some more
Perfect.
information for you.
Okay.
And
Yeah, with this.
part of our Pan-Caribbean Sankofa motto idea is that our ancestors do not want to be forgotten. So we are always excited to find some story, and we do our research, and next thing you know, we're getting finding something else about grandmother and grandfather, and we add it to our family tree, and we just keep going forward. So thanks for being here and sharing with us today.
I just have one
Thank you.
last thing to show you. The Culebra Cut was the longest stretch and the hardest part of the canal construction. That's where most of the men died. After the canal was built, the United States government erected a monument along a mountain in the canal path, the path of the canal, so that every time ships go through the canal, they see this plaque. That's the last thing they will remember about the canal. And it was a monument not to the builders of the canal, but to Colonel Gaylord, who was in charge of that area of the construction. Now, you just saw the story. If you look at the plaque and take a look at the images on that plaque, by law, Americans were not allowed to use the pick and shovel in the digging of the canal. By law, that was menial work reserved for the Black laborers. But yet, to this day, that plaque is still there for the world to see. So you leave there, you sail through the canal and you leave, and you're left with an image that is totally incorrect. That did not exist. And that is the way they have shown respect for the builders of the canal. It's there for you to see.
Thank you very much. And I know I saw a couple of other hands, and I'm sorry we didn't get to you for the question and answer, but Mr. Foster is here all day, and I highly encourage you to go up and talk to him. He has fascinating stories about his production and the research he did. I want to thank you again very much for your presentation.
It was my pleasure.
And Fran, if you'll join me up here momentarily. We also hope we don't embarrass you here, but we're going to present Mr. Foster with a certificate of appreciation. And I want to read this before we hand it to you, Roman. It says, a certificate of appreciation presented to Roman J. Foster in recognition of your significant achievements in preserving the stories of the Caribbean diggers of the Panama Canal in their own voices, your dedication to raising awareness of their incredible contributions and sacrifices, and your commitment to documenting the history and culture of the Caribbean people. So, Roman, we'd like to present this to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one announcement to make. I have decided to donate to the University of Florida all the films of the interviews of the diggers, all the research material, everything that we have, so that the University of Florida will be the home of the history of the builders of the canal. And we're in the process of working on that. It's going to take a little while because there's a lot of legal stuff that I was not even aware of. But as soon as we straighten everything out, I plan to transfer everything over to these great individuals. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you. We're truly honored that you're trusting us with these treasures. We really are. And we're going to do our best to preserve them properly and share them with the world in the way they should. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It's a hard act to follow that up, but lunch might be able to cut the mustard in terms of following it up. I think people might be hungry now. Just the same as yesterday, if you were here with us yesterday, if not, lunch is on this end of the room down here. Help yourself. You can eat at the table where you've been sitting. You can socialize. Fran, did you want to say something about the? I'll hold it up and you say yes.
I just want everyone to know that we don't. Yeah. Just momentarily, I just want everyone to know that we have a few more diggers CDs, DVDs for sale. And we also have t-shirts. It's a $20 donation. And this t-shirt represents the 50-mile Canal Zone townships that where the Panama Canal was built and the communities where all the West Indians and Americans lived. $20 donation. If we don't have your size, we will be happy, or your color preference, we will be happy to take your money, place the order, and send it out and mail it to you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jen.
And just to remind everybody that I know, thank you again, by the way, to our wonderful visitors from PK Young. Thank you so much. I know you'll be leaving us after lunch. We will be starting back up again at 2 p.m. today. 2 p.m. Thank you.